Let's go beyond the connection. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and we've got a super interesting conversation with Tim Newton. Now, Tim, part of what this makes this as a really interesting conversation is you are a deep technology expert, not only just overall, that you've been a 3-time CTO, but in the restaurant industry as well. And you've led major digital transformations. You started out as a programmer, so you know a lot about what we're going to be talking about today, which is the connected kitchen, the digital connections that happen in and outside of the kitchen that just completely drive operations and service and revenue in the business. And it's an interesting conversation, not only for the QSR industry, and you're currently the CTO at Long John Silver's, but it's the kind of thing where, dial back 5 years ago, a lot of CTOs, we were considered a support department. We didn't necessarily have a seat at the table. And these days, there ain't nothing happens.
Every project is an IT project. Yeah,
absolutely. So here's what I'd love to do. I'd love to just have you explain maybe a little bit more about your background before we get started here. And I will say one thing that you and I just had a chuckle not because this was a laughable moment, but you actually fell out of a tree while hunting a tree stand about a year ago. You spent a lot of time in the hospital, and 10 weeks or so you couldn't do weight bearing. And then a year later you were up hiking with your wife. So we chuckled about how network resiliency and your own personal resiliency. Anyways, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your professional experience before we dig in.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been in technology almost 30 years. Is actually as soon as I got out of the Marine Corps back in 1996, I got into technology. Little known fact, I was an air traffic controller in the Marine Corps, which was super exciting. Love the field. If I could have done that in the civilian world, I would have done it. It just so happened that the field was flooded. And once I got into technology and programming, I sort of fell in love. I consider myself a bit of a technology mutt. And what I mean by that is I got into programming, primarily web-based applications and that sort of stuff, but I've done it in a myriad of industries. I've done startup work. I've done healthcare for a number of years, about 7 years in healthcare, some time in banking and finance, a little bit of government work. The vast majority of which, though, has been within the QSR space since 2011.
Fantastic. I'm going to just pull us right into the most important part here. And what I'd love to do before with the technology aspect of it, you and I talked last time about just in terms of growth for the business, and then how, from a technology perspective, we support this, kind of the relentless product innovation that has to happen. And if you could give us your perspective on that, and then we'll put a technology lens on it as well.
Sure. Yeah. This is just my perspective. When I spent 9 years with Papa John's, some of our most profitable years were those years where we were turning out new and exciting flavors within the pizza space. So buffalo chicken pizza or a Philadelphia cheesesteak type pizza. Those are some of our best years. It seems like we were getting our core customers to come back. We were also getting new customers to engage. So from my perspective, when a QSR brand specifically can keep a rhythm, it doesn't have to be outrageous. It doesn't have to be every month, but just some sort of cadence of regular product innovation. It keeps the brand fresh. And I think that brings in new customers. Somebody's always wanting to try something because it's not something they've maybe heard of from the brand before. But I also think to keep your core customers still interested in the brand and trying new flavors, especially if they like your core products.
Now, what's interesting is we wouldn't naturally think of technology support in product innovation like that, but tie those two together for us if you could.
Yeah. So I think in addition to that flavor, what people come to a QSR for is food. But in addition to that, I think you've got opportunities within the technology space, whether it be in digital menu boards, whether it be in kiosk, mobile app, something innovative at the drive-through, such as drive-through AI. I think those types of product innovations also engage the customer. I've got a 21-year-old daughter who stays glued to her phone the vast majority of the time. And honestly, if there wasn't an ordering app for a restaurant, she's liable not to go there. So I think that type of technology innovation paired with the continued innovation in the food space is what keeps a brand alive.
And you even went and talked to the operations behind the innovation, and even at that level, how technology is coming to play. If you could explain that level.
Yeah, sure. So certainly you got systems out there that allow for whether it's recipe management, whether it's got to do with the ingredients, whether it's got to do with the things that the innovation and culinary teams are leveraging across. Here's, I got my 17, call it core ingredients. What new things can I do? Building systems around those to make sure. At Papa John's, we actually developed an innovation tied into culinary where the rating system that the corporate office would use, we'd have not like our secret shop, but you'd come into a little booth, you'd taste the food, you'd give your perspective on it. All of that was tied into the back end system there, where it was then tied into our core ingredients. So our culinary team could look years down the road and go, wait a minute, didn't we try this a couple of years ago? What was the sentiment about it? And allow the team to go back into that. In much the same way, we leverage that sort of innovation and testing philosophy into our mobile applications and our user experience. When we wanted to change something, we did a similar thing. Hey, come in and try this innovation or take a look at the screenshots. Which one of these things looks easier? And so when somebody comes in, a new CMO comes in down the road and says, hey, I think we need to change the mobile app to look like this. We looked at that a couple of years ago. Let me bring up some of the data for you and show you what the customer sentiment was at that time. Things change over time, but it's always nice to be able to come back and put those data points.
I love that idea of bringing the voice of the customer in and archiving it, having it influence decision making, because that's the highest authority. And you reminded me of the frictionless ordering experience that has to happen in like literally minutes. And if it doesn't, then we're not going to get that repeat business and we're not going to get that kind of growth. Tell me a little bit about the importance of the ordering process, how you think about frictionless and delivery in just like such a short amount of time.
Yeah, I think e-commerce within the QSR or just restaurant space in general is got to be so much smaller and tighter than in normal retail. And Amazon, right now, if you went out to my phone, you're going to look at my Amazon account and I've probably got 15 things that are in my cart. My wife has probably over 100 things in her cart. When I look at it and I'm going, what's going on over there? She's, I'm not buying everything. This is just the way I window shop. Most of the time, your consumers that are eating food aren't window shopping. They're hungry now. They want something now. Sometimes they're trying to beat the line at the drive-thru or beat the line at the front counter with a digital order. And you're going to lose them if it's not just super easy to lose. So it's either got to be something where you're retaining either the location of the restaurant. I always go to my favorite QSR. You're retaining their favorite item that they've always had, so that you're going from, hey, hunt around our menu and figure out what you want to eat, to, hey, you should know me. I come to you all the time. I want that one-click type of experience. So when we think about that, frictionless for us is just making it super stupid simple, very easy to use, as few clicks as possible, and retain as much information as the consumer is willing to give you within privacy constraints, but retain as much information as you can so that you just make it super easy for them the next time around.
Give us an idea on the trends. And no, I don't want any proprietary data from Long John Silver's, but the importance of dine in versus out, where that trend is going, that directly then ties into that frictionless ordering. Are they intending to come in, or are they intending just to drive through, order, drive through and head out?
Yeah, I think what we've started to see, certainly when COVID hit, there was obviously folks could not come into the dining experience. And I think you'll see in the industry right now what's happening, specifically in fast casual and casual restaurants. Some of those, Chili's is a star, they're growing because consumers are now wanting to dine in a little bit more. That being said, for a concept such as ours with the drive-through, we've actually seen a decline in drive-through while we've seen an increase in our digital. To me, that speaks to the fact that they're still looking for that convenience of the drive-through without the weight of the drive-through stack. They want to be able to beat the stack. They want to be able to beat the line. So we've seen more prevalence for those that aren't wanting to dine in, and our dining has stayed steady state. It hasn't really gone up or gone down once the bubble after COVID came into play. We've just seen the increase in digital and the decrease in drive-through, and we believe that's direct correlation to I'm just trying to get to not have to deal with the line.
So all of that is time sensitivity, where the patrons are very much thinking about how quickly, how easily I can get in and out. Now, if you can tie that to the operations that are happening in the kitchen, and then digitally what you're on the app or what the promise of delivery time, pickup times. How important is the connection to what's going on in the kitchen to that customer experience? And that digital connection is the key. If you could paint that story for us.
Yeah, I think the fact that you've got customers right now, a consumer base, certainly a younger consumer base for sure, that's used to instant satisfaction and instant gratification. They don't want to wait. And which is why I think they're thinking, I'm going to spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the car driving to my fast food restaurant. I don't want to wait another 10 or 15 minutes in the line. I want to go there. I want to get my food. I want that instant gratification. The challenge certainly and the restaurant is I can see, whether it be through a drive-through camera or just looking out the window, I can see that line and I can anticipate, all right, I might need to drop some additional fries, or I might need to drop some hush puppies or fish or whatever the case may be. You can't see that customer that is miles away and in the ether on the internet kind of connecting to you. So I think the ability for visually being able to see, so your KDS has got to be right there for you to be able to see what's going on. You got to understand those online orders have to fit into sort of the seamlessness of the restaurant experience. And then all of that technology that's making it super easy for your customer, you got to certainly have that super easy for the team members. The POS system itself has to be super easy. You have to start looking at smart kitchen appliances that are able to heat up even before you open up the restaurant, whether it be the KDS monitoring systems that allow you to see the customers and the digital stack, if you will, all of that stuff to make it easier on the team members so they can then serve the guests.
And how does that translate into KPIs for the business that you track? And how important is that digital connection to the kitchen to track the most important KPIs that drive the operations and the customer experience?
Yeah, I think speed of service is like one of the number one items, certainly in a drive-through concept. So whether it be from the drive-through timers that are going off, some of the things that we're looking at specifically as far as AI ordering is specifically to target that, not just the speed metric, but also that consistency, consistent upsells, consistent times in response. The last thing somebody wants to do when they hit the drive-through is, hey, they hear that initial script, hey, welcome to Long John Silver's, can I take your order? And then you start into the order and it's like, hold please, because you got that team member that's trying to do 15 different things. So I think the ability to turn some of that into where AI can go with it, AI can start taking that order while that team member is either putting a bag together, trying to handle the dine-in guest, trying to drop an additional set of fish because we're just now getting ready to get into dinner rush. The ability for those guys to focus on the things that something like AI can't do or other technologies can't do, which is actually making the product better for the consumer. This frees up the time for the human to be able to do those sorts of things. So those metrics like speed of service, I think you could start getting into sentiment. What is the guest experience truly like? Because you're getting voice insights from that interaction at the drive-through. All of those things are super important.
I had my very first total 100% AI drive-through experience at a Wendy's restaurant. I don't know, 3 weeks or so ago. My first reaction was, that's really cool. The second one was, hang on a second, I'm not talking to a real person. And then the next was like, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? I was like confused as a consumer in terms of, hey, is this good? And like, in the end, I was like, oh, they're really trying to help me here. That was the overall is I know you're doing that to help. It's to make that experience better. But I love the idea of even like tracking down sentiment and voice recognition and taking that in because those are signals we never used to have. And that we couldn't, even if we could, we had no way to like really aggregate them and look at them and understand them. So if I were to say, okay, impact on the guest experience, and we talked about speed and interaction in the drive-through and everything. If you were talking about the things that are the layers, a few layers behind that, like connection to inventory systems, prep for upcoming mealtime, dinner hour, and things like that, what are some of the other things that are critical that the connected or digital kitchen is so important to today?
Yeah, I think where things are going, I think you nailed it with all that interconnectivity. So my back office system has got to be able to understand what my transactions were like perhaps a year ago. Generally speaking, that's how we look at it. We look at the forecast, the third Tuesday of November, October, whatever. It looked like this. What were the other variables? It was raining that day. It's going to be sunny this time. If your pizza You love rain because it's like the liquid coupon. If you drive through, the rain or the snow, inclement weather is not great for you. So you like those sunny days, but you maybe want the temperature to be a little bit colder so folks don't want to get outside, but they want to come to your restaurant. So I think you got to factor those things in at a forecast. That's going to help you with your labor right out the gate. The second thing it's going to do is also for what you mentioned, prep time. And maybe it's got a lens into inventory. All those systems have to be interconnected together to make the whole engine work faster. Ideally, for a restaurant there, that count is happening in real time. So the count at the end of the night or the end of the week or the end of the shift, whenever your inventory counts happen, they're immediately tied to what's going on, whether it be what sales did you do today, where are you projected to do tomorrow, or by Wednesday, you got to get your order in. And so what we're seeing right now is you're going to be down on, say, tartar sauce, your fish looks good, but hey, maybe you need fries. All of that stuff's interconnected at not only when what's going on with the order, the depletion and the waste, also whether you can leverage some tools. There's tools out there right now where folks are using augmented reality to do that inventory. But I think that's really just going to be more of a checks and balance. The systems should tell you, hey, it looks like you depleted it. I've heard of systems where folks are actually taking things out of the freezer. There's RFID tied to those products. There's a reader above the freezer that's going, hey, they just took out a case of fish. Let me deplete that case of fish, and then I'll compare that against the transactions. What's going to tell me, all right, I don't have theft going out the door. Somebody didn't walk out the door with that case, but it's also going to help me to go, all right, now we're down to 2 in the freezer, and we always want to keep 5 on hand. Let's go ahead and pre-set up that commissary order to have 3 more cases of fish on top of it, in addition to whatever I'm expecting based upon the traffic.
This is phenomenal. Like, we never got into the business because we thought we were going to be like data analytic geeks. But that's what it really comes down to these days. But here's the other part that really impacts the customer experience, and that's the operators. And we're constantly training and we're constantly thinking about all of these systems that we're putting in. Is it adding complexity to them? Is it requiring more of them? Is it taking away, or is it giving them more time to be proactive and offer a better service? What's your opinion in kind of this digital age, AI? Is it helping us support the operators so that we could create a better overall experience for the customers? And how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it certainly is. I think it's where it's implemented and how it's implemented, because we're still a little ways away from these completely autonomous systems, like aside from maybe the Tesla car out there. But in a restaurant, we're a little bit of ways away from that. Where we are getting much better is I want to pull that manager out of the office and get them on the floor so that they're leading their teams and they're serving their guests. And so what's that mean? If there's some type of a per shift check-in that requires them to go into the office, the first thing I want to do is go, all right, is that check-in even necessary? Does it require a human to do X, Y, and Z? Because if all they're doing is going in and looking at pulling some reports, well, I can skip that step almost immediately. Let's just have something, whether it be at the corporate office or in the back office system there at the restaurant, let's tie those numbers together. And if it's off, then maybe I send an insight, a push notification to the manager that says, hey, the back end systems are reading something a little bit wrong. You might want to take a look at X. So keeping that manager out of the office as much as possible so that they can serve the guests. I think AI has got great potential for doing just the normal sort of data matching steps. It can do things such as checking the freezer temperature. Some of these stuff that's just normal routine. We can use vision AI to make sure that we don't have somebody that's, hey, go check the back door. We check the back door once an hour to make sure that there's not an employee that's gone out there, cracked it open because they're too hot or out there smoking or doing whatever. Vision AI can watch that space and go, yeah, the door is closed and it's been closed for the last 3 hours. Only alert the manager. So it's stuff like that, some of those mundane type tasks that always happen per shift that I think, we could absolutely leverage AI now. That's not a pipe dream to get those sort of things and more notification, alerting, driving insights to the GM so that the GM is really, that's more of a like tap on the shoulder versus let me stop what I'm doing serving the guests and go serve just the process, because that's not what you want.
I love it. We're walking through one by one how the connected or digital kitchen impacts the digitizing of the business, product development and innovation. How is it impacting operations, the operators, the customer, and the GMs? And what are changing these days to you as the CTO from the board, from your CEO? Changes in technology, and it leads to then changes in expectations of what they're expecting of you as the chief technology officer of Long John Silver's. What are the new expectations that you're living under? You're like, okay, I got to really deliver on this. How is that changing these days?
This might not be the answer you want to hear. I don't think it's changed, because what I think has always existed within business is ROI. And whether that ROI comes with a couple additional letters like AI, like, yes, you're absolutely right. The president, CEO, our owner asks me certain questions related to AI. What are we doing with AI? Because they hear AI out there. But they're not ready to hear, oh, we've got to do X, Y, and Z with triple dollar signs without, okay, what's the return and when do I see it? And I don't think those things have changed. I think you still got to come with, here's the business case. Here's the value I'm going to drive. Here's the cost for that, and here's the payback time. Now, what I do think is changing is that sometimes, or maybe it's not changing, but it's looked at a little bit differently. I think we're putting more value on certainly what I call the soft dollar things, making it an experience frictionless for the customer potentially adds to frequency them coming back. So I might be able to put a dollar amount on that, or I might just say, hey, the customer was happy. They rung our bell. We have a bell ringing service. They rung our bell a little bit more than they did in the past. Or, you know what, it seems like we're retaining our employees more because we've made the POS simpler on them. We've made inventory management simpler on them. And I think those are the types of things that as an operator-driven organization, that's what I'm hearing in our senior leadership level. What's going to make it easier on the team member? Yeah, there's a cost tied to that, but there's certainly a value benefit tied to happy team members make happy customers.
And what I heard loud and clear there too is that you're having to speak a different language when you're talking to the C-suite. You're speaking ROI, returns, impact on revenue growth. And so that's something that also we didn't go through business school, but it's so important as a C-suite that we take on a rightful seat at the table. Means that we understand the business model and we understand how all of this that we're doing, ultimately, if we unpack it, it's to grow the business and provide a return to the business. So I just want to underscore that. So I think we've probably really covered well how the digital connections inside the operations of the business are so important. That begs another question. That then, what is the new level of focus on the network and resiliency and consistency and failover systems? Has that ratcheted to a new level, and has the technology in the network failovers and resiliency, has that progressed as well in your mind?
I think it has. I think not only had the technologies improved, but the thought process behind it. I remember when I joined Papa John's back in 2011, we were having arguments with franchisees about putting in secondary internet connections. I don't need a secondary. If I can, what I do? We were looking in terms of pooled cellular devices. So we'd buy 500 gigs worth of data and spread it out across a number of stores because the main circuit didn't go down very often. When Papa John's got up to about 60% of online digital revenue, digital channels, digital ordering coming through there, those conversations were easy to be had. As a matter of fact, franchisees were coming to us going, I need a better resilient layer in my network. So I want to talk about, hey, maybe I need 2 pinned up hardwired connections versus the single one I have, or I don't want to use DSL. How can I get fiber in my location? So I think now in 2025, I'm not even having those types of conversations here at Long John Silver's. A few years ago, this organization, and credit to my predecessor, put together what they called the network of the future. And that network of the future came with one hardwired connection, one cellular device. That cellular device can connect to any cellular network. And nowadays, when we're talking about advancing what does network of the future 2.0 look like, we're actually talking about potentially like Starlink connections and satellite connectivity for those things. Because as I talk to the CMO and the CEO, we want to talk about building blocks of growth for this brand. It's all about digital. Digital means that order is not happening in the restaurant but that restaurant absolutely has to be connected to the broader world. So a lot of improvement in those areas, conversations have become much easier. And even the franchisees themselves are more educated on it. And so they're talking like, hey, I got Starlink at my house. Should I have Starlink in my restaurant?
I love that it's a franchisee conversation. And the last question on this is, you don't have feet on the street at every location. You're in a very edge distributed network. So it just has to work out there. It just has to be to the point where it's so autonomous, it's invisible, and we don't even have to think about it. And has the technology progressed in your mind that you don't have to worry about these locations? And oh my gosh, okay, today I got three restaurants down. We got to get somebody out there. Like, how has that mentality changed?
So the mentality is still there, but I will tell you, I haven't lost much sleep over it in the little over a year that I've been here. When I was with Papa John's and we were dealing with some of those challenges, there were absolutely some sleepless nights. There were absolutely some like, all right, we've got 500 stores tied to this one particular network that, yeah, it's dual homed, but if that particular location goes down, what's the impact? And the impact would be like 500 restaurants. Here at LJS, whether it be because the underlying network itself has improved so much, I think it's got something to do with that. But I think it's also got to do with the systems that are doing the monitoring. So they're picking up on whether it be network flapping, whether there's an upstream connection and you need to switch over to a different upstream hub to provide that circuit back, or whether it just goes, hey, I had too much flapping. Let's just go to cellular because cellular's handling it. Go to cellular at that point. So those things are happening in real time. We also are utilizing a managed service provider around that. So what essentially happens for me is a weekly status call that says we handled 5 tickets and there was no downtime. These devices went offline for a blip and the secondary circuits kicked in and now we fixed the other thing. It's much more of that almost reporting back to me the issues that used to keep me up at night.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good place to be. One last question for you, and this is the most important because we've just talked about so much. If there was, for the other CTOs and technology leaders that are out there and going to be tuning into this episode, what's the one most important thing that you want them to take away from our conversation?
I tell you, I made a LinkedIn post earlier this week about it. It's been around for a while, so it's relationships. And I would say those relationships are human relationships as much as the technology. And we're talking about AI because you're going to be dealing with vendors. But at least right now, I've not bought from an AI vendor. I've bought from a human being. And I will tell you that some of my best successes related to projects have boiled down to the relationships I have had with the humans behind the software, the hardware, the vendors. So that's my number one thing to tell any CTO because technology is going to come and go. Architectures are going to come and go. The way we skin the cat, if you will, is going to change. What's not going to change is the connection you have with, I'm not talking just about the salesperson. I'm actually talking about beyond that, your customer success folks, the folks that you have a conversation with at 3 a.m. in the morning when a system's down, not the guy that just sold you and took you to dinner or brought you a nice bourbon. It's having that relationship that you can have. I just had a top to top conversation this week, CEO to CEO, COO to CTO, because we're having some challenges with a particular project. But the fact that those folks came to our office, heard us very candidly, shared cell phone numbers, and we're getting text messages now from each other. That's the type of relationship that you've got to have in this seat to be able to be successful, because at the end of the day, the technology is going to fail. It's the humans behind it that handle the situation, the crisis in the moment that make the successes.
I have to tell you, the mission of this podcast is to bring different perspectives, insights from different experiences and different industries. And if we can bring it all together and we can share like those kind of insights, very easy for us to talk about the technology and the impact on the business. It's really good and refreshing to hear about how important the relationships are. But those kinds of insights, if we can all bring them together, that's the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you were amazing today in terms of being that rising tide. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for coming on and sharing with us today.
Now, Stephen, I appreciate the invite. It was a pleasure talking to you. As I mentioned earlier, I don't like talking about myself. I'd much rather talk about technology, the relationships and that sort of thing, but you made it super easy. And hopefully your viewers get some value out of this.